Welcome to the Healing Grove podcast. I'm Dr. Kristin, an integrative holistic family physician, author of Life After Lyme, and host in this virtual space of learning, healing, and growing. I believe humans are like trees, and our physical limb is only one of many. Health on all limbs of the tree, emotional, conceptual, social, spiritual, is absolutely required for the whole tree that is you to be vibrantly well. I created the Healing Grove podcast as a place to showcase some of the world's best integrative and holistic medicine, to expose you to transformative tools and mindset shifts for all limbs of your tree. I hope you enjoy our conversation in the Healing Grove today as much as I enjoyed having it. Welcome back, everyone, to the Healing Grove podcast. I'm delighted today to introduce you to my guest, Tania Elfersy. But first, let me tell you a little bit about her. She's a transformative coach, an award-winning author specializing in midlife women's health. Tania has spent years researching what causes and what can relieve symptoms associated with perimenopause and menopause. She became free of her own physical and emotional symptoms naturally, simply, through insight alone. And we're going to get into that in this conversation. Tania set up the Wiser Woman Project in 2015 to help women transform their experience of midlife change and reach freedom from hot flashes, night sweats, anxiety, mood swings, insomnia, fatigue, and more. Through her coaching, writing, and teaching, she connects women to the innate brilliance of their body. Having seen that healing occurs at ease when we relax into the divine intelligence within. She's the author of The Wiser Woman's Guide to Perimenopause and Menopause, a beautiful little purple book, which I'm holding in my hand, and also the co-author of an award-winning book on motherhood called Purple Leaves, Red Cherries. And we'll leave some links in the show notes about how to access those materials afterwards if you're interested. So Tania, welcome to the Healing Grove podcast.
Lovely to be here. I'm excited for our chat today.
Me too. Partly because, as you mentioned earlier, I've recently just interviewed my good friend, Dr. Hines, regarding hormone replacement therapy, and you take a very different approach. And even though I have a lot of patients who are on hormone therapy, and I'm on hormone therapy myself, full disclosure, I am always eager to entertain all sides. And I love the way in which you are really helping women to nourish the emotional, spiritual, cognitive limbs of their tree. And getting massive physical results as well. So I really am excited to hear all about that.
Yeah. It's wonderful the way the body works. It's so often that, we can just take care of the emotional and spiritual side, and the body then aligns on the physical level. So
yeah, the limbs are all connected to the same tree, it turns out.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear you share with this audience a little bit about what brought you to where you are now as a coach of women in midlife.
Yes. So things started when I was 43 and I had no idea about menopause, perimenopause. And I thought menopause doesn't happen when we're 51. For some reason, I thought it would happen quickly. And back then, which is 12 years ago now, there wasn't very much talk about perimenopause, but something had happened that once the menopause transition was called menopause, and then it was split up into perimenopause, the years leading up to 1 year past your last period, which is then a point of menopause, and then you're in postmenopause. And so in my early 40s, like I said, I had no idea that I was going through change. But I just started feeling very not like myself. And I was getting sick a lot with the kids, which hadn't happened before. And I was having some hair loss, and I was having mood swings, and I was feeling, having some skin problems and feeling really not like myself. And I was having night sweats, which could have been a giveaway, but I didn't put it all together then. And it took me a few years until I realized, oh, I heard on a webinar, there's this thing called perimenopause. And I was like, really? What's that? How comes I didn't know? And I thought I was quite, well read on women's health. And I was like, what's going on? And then I turned to all my 40-something friends, and none of them had any clue. And they were all experiencing, symptoms, some sorts of symptoms. And so that set me off on a journey. And I thought, well, it's so interesting that I didn't know anything about it. And I thought, let's see. I was already on a holistic I already had a holistic approach to health. So I was like, well, how can I help myself in a holistic way? So I did a lot of acupuncture and Bach remedies and healing and taking potions and creams, etc., etc. And although I could take something off the physical symptoms, I never really felt healed or like myself again. And then, as luck would have it, I came across an understanding called the three principles of innate health, which is a psychological and spiritual explanation of how we have our human experience day to day. And very quickly, after coming across that understanding, I had an insight about the nature of thought. And so women could be listening to this and going, thought, but what's that got to do with, night sweats and the hot flushes, etc. But it turns out that I was innocently creating a lot of stress by taking my thinking seriously. And at the time, I was juggling a little business. My kids were much younger, my 3 kids, and I was feeling a lot of the time not enough. And when I heard that thought, I'm not enough. And for me, it was like, I'm not enough in motherhood, in my business. But for other women, so often we hear that thought, I'm not enough because my past was like this, my relationship is like that, I live in this house instead of that, whatever it is that we create for ourselves. We can hear that thought and we take it very seriously, and then we feel bad, and then we think there's something that we need to do. And that was my experience. And I just saw in an instant that I had a choice. I could have that thought, I was not enough, and I didn't have to take it seriously. And it sounds way too simple, but in that moment, something shifted. And I had an awareness of I didn't have to take any thinking seriously, and I really did have a choice. And my symptoms, all of my symptoms, physical and emotional symptoms, all cleared up within days. And at the time, I was like, well, that's interesting. And then I realized, oh, actually, this is really interesting. What's just happened? So I should perhaps become more familiar with this understanding. And then, I started to share it very timidly, because people say, well, what do you mean? From talking to you or taking an online course, then I could heal my symptoms. And I was like, actually, really, we can, because we innocently create so much stress through misunderstanding the human experience. And when we come to a better understanding of the human experience through an awareness of a universal intelligence, a consciousness, our level of consciousness, and the nature of thought, then we can have a much more joy-filled, less stress-filled life. And that aligns, then it just allows the body to align itself, and physical symptoms and emotional symptoms begin to disappear.
Amazing. So it occurs to me that what happened to you, Tania, some people would describe as an epiphany. Some people might call it a spiritual awakening. What is the name that you give to what happened, or do you have a name for it?
Yeah, it could be an epiphany. I'd call it an insight. I just remember the moment, and I was like, in that moment, I thought, oh, I think I've cleared up my PMS, because I saw at the time, oh, I'm saying I have all these issues, but like I'm creating those issues by taking thinking seriously. And so that felt that it was connected to what I was experiencing, which was 2 weeks of PMS every month. So, I thought, well, I think I'm not going to have PMS anymore, because I just think I'm not going to take those issues seriously, because I'm realizing I'm making them up. And then all the physical symptoms cleared up too. So it was also, you could describe it as a shift in consciousness. And that sounds as well very, how can you describe that, a shift in consciousness? But that's essentially what I help women achieve. It's a shift in consciousness, and then we have a different experience of everything in life, and we're able to have a lighter experience of everything in life.
Wow. There's a lot of questions I have. The first question is, at what point did you realize this was that you were going to heal your PMS through your thoughts and your thinking? Was it immediately, or was it just a ramification of, I'm no longer taking any thinking seriously because of this shift? And that includes the thought that I'm going to be sick for 2 weeks out of the month, or that includes the thought that this is perimenopause and it's, it's this, and this. Like, were you bringing that thinking and that kind of reining in of the thinking to the issues on your physical limb at this time?
Yeah. I thought in the moment that I had the instant, I was like, oh, I know, I don't have to take my thinking seriously. I think I'm not going to have PMS. That was, what I saw in the instant. But for example, really extraordinary example of a symptom clearing up was I had really bad eczema on my hands. And it was like, in my house, I could control the soaps that we used. But I would go to a restaurant or a friend's house, family's house, and I would use the soap in the bathroom, and it would be like acid or something, on my hands. And then there'd be peeling and itchy, etc. And that symptom cleared up within days. So definitely not all the soaps in the world changed, but my body's ability to detox whatever chemicals are in soap was, it was brought back to its normal level because I removed the stress element. And so my body was just able to function as it knows how to do, because I wasn't creating this chaos through taking thinking seriously.
Were there particular thoughts that still kind of come back? I mean, to me, it's thinking is like a habit. We have these habits that are ineffective sometimes, but they're habits. And if we're unconscious of the habits, they don't really go away on their own, right? Until we really systematically excise them. It sounds like you had a very clear insight that you were no longer taking them seriously, but were they kind of lapping at your heels still? Like, were the feelings or the thoughts kind of coming up and you had to be like, don't believe you, not taking you seriously, take a vacation? What was happening with that?
Yeah, yeah. First of all, it was a sense of freedom, right? So you could hear what I'm saying and think, oh, thou must not take your thinking seriously, right? And then it becomes something to do. But it wasn't that. It was a freedom of like, oh, I have choice. I never knew. I never knew that a thought could land in my head and I have a choice to take it seriously or not. So I can obviously still have that thought come into my head of, I'm not enough or anything else that could come. And if I start taking it seriously, it can start feeling very uncomfortable. But I very quickly remember, oh, I'm just having an experience based on my relationship to my thinking in this moment. Or another way to look at it is based on my state of mind. So if we're in a low state of mind and we're having, we've woken up and, having that kind of day where nothing seems to be going right, then if you face some kind of other challenge, or even then you're sitting on a traffic jam or something, you're going to have a more uncomfortable experience of it. But it's not the traffic jam. It's not the cashier, the woman working at the cashier at the supermarket who's creating a long queue. It's your thinking about those things, and it's your state of mind about, as you engage with those circumstances. So it's wonderful because we can't possibly control the circumstances in life, and we can't possibly control our thinking in life. That's a lot of work. If I said to myself, I mustn't have that thought, I'm not good enough, or any thought that could create discomfort, I can have any crazy thought come into my head. And I just know that it's a thought. It passes just like clouds in the sky, and I don't need to control the weather, right? The sun is always there, just as my divine true nature is always there. And sometimes there'll be storms and sometimes there'll be clearer sky. And I don't need to control it because thoughts come, thoughts go. And I can have a light relationship with all of them, no matter what they are.
I'm curious about the kinds of thoughts that women in their midlife tend to have again and again. You mentioned, I'm not enough. Are there other common patterns you see in what women are telling themselves that cause suffering?
Yeah, I'm not enough, or I don't manage to do enough. It's very much like this. You can always drill it down to I'm not enough. I shouldn't have left my career. I should have left my career and stayed at home with the kids. I thought I'd be in a different relationship, and I'm terrible at relationships, and I'm never going to be in a relationship. For many women, it's just it actually doesn't matter. Like we can have so many different sorts of thoughts, and actually the content doesn't matter, because a woman can say no, but really, I have this trauma that I carry with me, and thus I have this thinking, and thus I have this fear. And I can have, respect for a woman in that situation. And once we understand the nature of thought, the content of our thought doesn't matter. it's about our understanding of the nature of thought. So we all have crazy thoughts coming into our head. And, if I were to say, there's right next to you right now, there's a green monster with pink spots and purple horns, that you would know that you don't need to take that seriously. But if I say, oh, a woman starts thinking, I've done really badly and my boss is going to say this and this and this, and then my husband's going to say this and this and this, and then this is going to lead to this. We make up these stories all the time. And then we start feeling bad because we start believing them. And we can just as easily not believe them, just as you don't believe that there's a monster sitting right next to you. You can shake that off. But when we tell ourselves, no, I'm not enough, or I've done a really bad job, or I'm a disaster in relationships, or I'm whatever it is, that story that runs on loop, we so often believe it and we don't realize that it's just made up. It's just a thought. There's actually no difference in the nature of thought of, I'm not enough, or I'd like a glass of water. They're made of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just our relationship to them that creates a different feeling. So we're always, feeling the experience of our thinking. That's it. We're not actually feeling circumstances.
Yeah. I'm wondering, you brought up, I need a glass of water, and I'm wondering if there are any thoughts that we would do well to take seriously.
Well, that a great question. And that comes down to understanding what wisdom actually feels like. So we know the difference between, oh, I think I should have a glass of water, which feels quite neutral and okay, or even, oh, I think I'd like to call that friend today. I haven't spoken to her for a while. And it feels like something nice that will happen. The truth is always in that pleasant, calm feeling. And then we have other thoughts that we're like, I should really, I should have done this, or it's terrible that I'm going to be late for this party and everyone's going to blame me, or, oh, I forgot to buy this at the supermarket and now it's going to be a disaster for the family and the family meal is going to, that comes with a very different flavor when we start taking it seriously. And so you can see that when we experience discomfort, there's no truth there for us. The truth is in the pleasant feeling. It's always there. Now, I can say this to women 100 times. You have to experiment with yourself. And I've been experimenting with that for years. And I'm like, is that really true? No, is that really true? Because right now, my kids have just done, and I'm like, well, I think there's a different experience to be had of this situation. And then I just let it go. And I don't need to find that other experience of this situation, right? If something is going crazy in the family or whatever, I don't need to create the other experience. I don't need to then take the thoughts and say, okay, I need these kind of thoughts in my head. No, I come back into presence. I calm down and a different experience is created. And I remember what I know. Oh, the truth is in the pleasant feeling. The shoulds, the I'm bad, I'm terrible, that's all made up. And I can let it go.
Or the sorries. Let's talk about the sorries. Does this happen
Yeah.
in your culture? There's just a lot of I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry that
Yeah.
happens in the US. And I find myself falling into that sometimes too. And yeah, how do you counsel women about that? What's your take on the sorries?
Yeah. It's really the same because if you're sorry about something and you feel inspired that, oh, you know what, I didn't speak very nicely. For example, I didn't speak very nicely to one of my kids. Like there was a better way to explain what I actually wanted from them in that moment. I can go and say, look, I'm sorry that I shouted, I'm tired, whatever. So this is what I wanted to let you know. Okay, so that comes from calm. That's not me, bashing myself over the head. I'm such a terrible mom. I always do this. But if we're going around going, oh goodness, I must say I'm sorry because that was really bad, because they're going to think that, again, it comes with a different flavor. And so it goes back to the point of the content of the thought doesn't matter. We can use our feelings like a barometer. Oh, am I in stormy thinking right now? Is that because that's all that's going on, right? In the stormy thinking, I can take fear seriously and worry and sorry and shoulds and, and all of that. And then I can say, okay, that's okay that I hang around in that stormy feeling. I don't need to run away from it. But I know that if I just come back to the present, I'll come back into a calmer feeling. And it's like the clouds will just go by themselves. I don't need to push them away. They'll just go by. Sun will come back out again. And I'll be back to my true self. So we have this incredible potential to, just through thought, have so many different experiences and worries and fear. And by having an understanding of the way thought works, we can spend more time in peace of mind. And like I said, it doesn't matter if we go into the stormy thinking. It doesn't matter if we take things really seriously, because we always have our default, which is peace of mind. That's the way we were born. And that remains our default for life.
Wow. How much of you and your time was spent in the default mode before this shift of awareness occurred? Like, give us a picture of like Tania before, Tania after. Like, did your family
Well,
notice? Was everyone like, oh my gosh, I'll have what she's having. What did she do?
well, I was quite a sort of optimistic, laid back person. I didn't have a long history of anxiety or depression or anything like that. But something certainly happened in my 40s that I felt like very not like myself, because I just felt, there was more anxiety. I was more moody. There was, I just felt like I couldn't cope quite with the shift in emotions so much. But even that, I tried to keep that quite to myself, and like, well, what am I going to do? Explode at my kids all the time, something, or my husband. So, but what happened within me is that like I said, I was able to remove the chaos that I was innocently creating. And we're all, we create that in innocence. We don't mean to harm ourselves. And then the biggest change was that all my symptoms cleared up. So then, of course, I was a more pleasant person to be. And of course, not having 2 weeks of PMS every month. I mean, that's, something in itself. So, but it was about me feeling very much off. It wasn't like I had conversation with my husband who's like, what's going on with you? What? But I told myself the stories of I'm not enough. I wasn't hearing it from anywhere else. I was creating that stress. And like I said, we all do it in our innocence.
Yeah. All right. I want to talk about hormones because it does sound like you started the story off by saying I was in perimenopause without really knowing it. And these physical symptoms happen, but you make a really good case in your book for this idea that your body's not broken. Hormones are not the problem. Lack of hormones or changes in hormones are not the problem. They're more of an opportunity and a gift, right? So help me understand how you view the relationship to your body and the hormones that were changing at that time in the larger context of this shift in this story.
Yes. So when I discovered about perimenopause, there was the main story that comes out when you do your research is your hormones. Is the depreciating level of hormones, or the fluctuating, first of all, level of hormones, and then the lower levels of hormones. And these are creating your symptoms. And my experience with my body was that it was quite brilliant. And I talk about this in the book. I had 3 natural pregnancies, 3 natural births, breastfeeding my kids, and I'd had these miraculous experiences with my body. And then to say, well, my body was able to do all of that. And then all of a sudden it comes to midlife and it turns stupid. Like, it doesn't know what hormones I need. Like, that just didn't make sense to me on a very basic level. I was like, well, how would that make any sense? And when you ask people, well, why would it make any sense that my body doesn't know what hormones I need and when? The only answer that you ever hear is because women never used to live beyond menopause. And that's not true. We know from ancient literature, even from the Bible or ancient Greek literature, that women have always lived beyond menopause. But there have been, through the ages, there were very low infant and child mortality rates, and that brought down the average life expectancy of of everyone, of men and women. But that's not to say that if a girl lived through to adulthood, she would die before menopause. No, she had a very good chance to live beyond menopause. And we can see that from wherever there's data. So then we must really ask, well, why would it make any sense that my body doesn't know what hormones I need? Is there a fault in my design? Am I designed to malfunction? Is it just that, society, we've created this modern society that's so out of balance and we eat so much crap but what I've seen is, even women who take very good care of their health can have symptoms. So it has to be something else. So we can look at it a few ways. And I think it's interesting to go back and look where the hormone story started from. And if we look back at what was going on in women's health when hormones first started to be isolated and talked about, etc., women were giving birth in twilight sleep. If like women were being knocked out unconscious, right, to give birth, because doctors believed, well, just that hysterical woman just needs to get out the way, she can be present but not at all aware, and then let the doctor come in and birth the baby, right? And then when the baby came out, then the woman was told, oh, there's this formula milk which is so much more advanced than your breast milk because it's developed by science. And these practices went on at that time when the hormone story and the menopause story was becoming more and more popular. So at the beginning of the last century, women were given ovaries in tablets or in injections and told, oh, well, your ovaries are, they're dead or they're dying. So of course you need ovaries from a mammal, another mammal. So eat these or, take these, inject these, etc. And then when hormones became isolated, it was like, well, of course, because your ovaries are dying, then and they create the hormones, of course you need hormones. Really? Are you telling me my body doesn't know? Because that's what you were telling me about birth. That's what you were telling me about breastfeeding. That's what you were telling me, through to the 1960s with the pill, etc. That's what you're telling me about my body doesn't really know, how to control menstruation. So, like, is this just part of that story of the woman's body doesn't know? And I believe it is. And if it was only the hormones that create symptoms and create discomfort at midlife, then all women would have symptoms, because all women, when they go through menopause, have this fluctuation and decrease of hormones. But not all women have symptoms. And more than that, we know that women's experience of menopause differs in different cultures. So what could it be? Well, we know that in cultures where aging is more respected and women have something to look forward to, becoming an elder, they have an easier time in menopause. We know in cultures where women have sort of more relaxed lives, look at, the blue zones. I'm a big fan of looking at what happens in blue zones. Well, in blue zones, women live long, healthy lives. They do not take hormone supplements. Not all of them eat tofu. You could make the case for Japan, but what about Costa Rica? What about Sardinia? What about the islands in Greece? And we can say, well, wait a minute, because if it was the hormones, if there was a direct correlation, we say with hormones, symptoms, all women would have to have them or have the symptoms. Not all women do. So there must be other factors involved. And I think it's much more interesting to look at the other factors. And I find it quite funny that we say, oh, no, the doctor will know better what hormones my body needs than my body, with this ancient divine intelligence that's been going on for, hundreds of thousands of years, and evolution of 100,000 years. And no, it doesn't know. It doesn't know. It doesn't make sense to me. My body knows. Let's get used to that idea. The body knows. The body's intelligent. Now, does that mean that when women take hormones, they can't ever feel some kind of relief? No, because what goes on during perimenopause or menopause is a sensitive time. There are fluctuations. I feel that it's a sensitive time. So yes, it's a sensitive time. But the problem is, in times which are sensitive, so adolescence, pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause and menopause, if we are out of balance, then we start experiencing symptoms. It's the same thing happens with a teenager. But teenagers, well, they have less, fewer responsibilities. They can sort of take things lighter often. But now more and more women, teenage girls are being put on the pill earlier and earlier because they're having some problems with their menstruation. And so medicine comes along and says, oh, we'll fix that. Well, how about what's going on in her life? Why is she having problems with menstruation? The same with pregnancy, postpartum. With pregnancy, we tend to understand that if a woman's having a lot of symptoms during pregnancy, a doctor will tend to say, well, are you working too hard? How's your sleep? How's your nutrition? Maybe take a few days off work, maybe take a few weeks off work. And we tend to give a woman sort of like, an understanding. We won't come in and say, it must be your crazy hormones. Let me go in and fix them, right? With postpartum, we have less of an understanding. And with menopause, really, we need to, I think, deepen our understanding and return to trusting the body. Because if women have always lived through menopause, which they have, why would the body suddenly go stupid, suddenly get it wrong, suddenly not know what hormones we need? We need the hormones that our body produces for post-reproductive life. We don't need the hormones that we had when we were, set up to reproduce. So there will be a shift, but we can trust the body that it knows what it's doing. And like I said, we can see in blue zones that the body does know.
I love the parallel you draw between the teenager going through puberty and the postmenopausal woman. And, the idea of this sensitive time is so beautifully described in your book. I really appreciated that. I've never heard anyone speak of these changes in that way and kind of draw sort of connections between all of them and how the hormones are preparing us for something unique and special during that time of our lives. I wonder if you could speak about what you think the hormones are preparing us, the change in hormones are preparing us. Like, why is it necessary to have such a dramatic shift in hormones? And is that sort of just because we're no longer reproductive age, or is that because there's something new and wonderful that's coming about in us?
Yeah. I think it's I think it's both, because I think that unfortunately, scientists looked at women and menopause and they're like, well, why does it make any sense that women would stop reproducing? However, any woman who's had young children, and let's say a young child, one of the kids or a few kids are sick, and then in comes a grandma figure who doesn't have young children attached to her breast or around her ankles, but she does have experience in childcare. Oh my goodness, what a relief, right? Any mother could remember like how that feels. So there is something that scientists have determined to be the grandma effect, and they had to go and look at orca whales who have postmenopausal whales swimming around in the pod, and when they do, the pod does much better. And they've found that it's because the postmenopausal whale, she doesn't have to look after her own children, because she's now helping the whole pod, and she has experience and wisdom, etc., and the pod thrives more. So then they're like, well, maybe that explains what happens in humans. Whereas women could say, well, I've known that the grandma effect works in humans because, they're so useful. So it seems that it's best for the species that at some point we stop reproducing and then we can be available to help younger generations. Another thing that I think happens is a readjustment. And the body, it seems to me, kind of lets us experiment in our 20s and 30s. We can eat a lot of crap, have emotionally, whacked out lives or whatever, have jobs that don't light us up, etc., and we can almost get away with it, sometimes. Come midlife, it's as if the body is saying, okay, I let you play around, but now you're going to learn. You're going to learn how good health is created, because if you don't, then it becomes more difficult to protect you as you move to older age. So it seems to me that it's this brilliance that bubbles to the surface at midlife and forces us to make adjustments, to learn more about how we can create our own health and co-create, by the way, with a divine force, and how then we can protect our health moving forward. So men have it as well, I think, but to a lesser degree. Like, our time is more sensitive, and perhaps that's why women have always lived longer than men. But that we're forced to make some kind of adjustment. We're forced to perhaps start walking, perhaps cleaning up our diet, perhaps prioritizing sleep, perhaps realizing that we want to have healthier relationships. And it's so interesting because I speak to so many women who've come to these conclusions, not in a sort of conscious way, perhaps, but just like they just knew that that's what they had to do. You know, they didn't set about and say, okay, now I'm going to do this, this, and this. But it was just like they knew, oh, my joints are achy. Oh, yeah, I'm not moving enough. Okay, maybe I should start walking every morning, or maybe I should, you know, take up Pilates again, or maybe whatever it is. And so they're cleaning up all different parts of their life because of this sensitive time, because their hormones are beautifully aligned, pushing them to make changes. Now, if we come in and say, oh, no, I just need to, you know, suppress the symptoms, I just don't want the symptoms. Well, you may suppress the symptoms. Some women find, you know, hormone therapy useful. A lot of women don't. A lot of women experience lots of side effects. But the point is that if all you're doing is suppressing symptoms and your body wants you to change, then what's going to happen next? Because your body's trying to speak to you. Your body's trying to say, hey, clear up. You know, clear up your diet, clean up your diet, or lighten up, or start moving again. And it's like, well, I'm just going to take the hormones and suppress my symptoms and convince my body that I'm not in a sensitive time. Then what happens down the line? What appears if we don't really slow down and ask ourselves, what does my body want me to know? And what shifts can I make moving forward?
It's just so compelling. And I guess I keep thinking about the research. Maybe we can get into the research a little bit, because as I am tempted to just pull everyone I put on hormones in the last 5 years off of the hormones because of these ideas, I'm also aware that some people are experiencing very different cognitive function without them. You know, they feel like, in the same way you felt like you got back to yourself through your mindset shift, they have gotten back to themselves through, you know, bioidentical hormones. And so I guess my question is it still possible to respect the sensitive time if you're supplementing with hormones through this period?
Well, firstly, it is, because like the body can, you know, take a lot of things and still remains intelligent. So I often say to women, you know, my work doesn't interfere. If you've chosen a medical, you know, solution as well, or even a natural solution or supplements or whatever, my work is on this side, and it's working within. And I often work with women who realize that they can come off hormones or stop their 10 supplements or whatever, because they're realizing, oh, I know how to create my health now. I know what's needed, and I really don't need these things. So I don't come in and tell women, come off hormones, come off your, you know, medication or supplements or anything. That's up to them and between them and their doctor. But often women come back to me and they go, oh yeah, you know, I just decided I'm coming off the HRT, or I'm coming off the supplements, or I've just realized that I have innate health within. So you know, there are many ways to journey through midlife. The important thing is that we understand that this is a time of transformation. We don't want to like neutralize that time. And then I would say, in terms of what women actually experience and what the research says, first of all, it's very difficult to find out the level of placebo effect that goes on with hormones, especially if women have been to different doctors who are saying, no, I'm not prescribing hormones, I'm not prescribing hormones. And then there's a celeb telling them, you need hormones, you need hormones. And then they rush and then they find the hormones, and, you know, and then there's a placebo effect. It's interesting when you read the research that the placebo effect is somehow measured differently from the outcome that they say that is, you know, occurs from hormones. So it's like, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just measure it in the same way? But there is a Professor Susan Davis, who's considered, for example, an expert in testosterone, and she'll talk about the huge placebo effect on testosterone that they found in studies, and they have found that, you know, there is some slight there can be a slight improvement in libido for some women, although she finds in her practice that overall women, over like a trial period, they decide not to take it. But testosterone, for example, is one of the hormones now that more and more doctors are talking about. Oh, perhaps you need testosterone, perhaps you need testosterone, and it's for cognitive function, and it's for not only libido, even though the only studies that have found any kind of impact is around libido, and that's for some women some of the time. But, you know, they're just chucking everything at it and saying, you're going to feel better, you're going to feel less depressed, you're going to feel. it seems that that's a placebo effect that's going on. So we don't know in terms of the other hormones, like how much that happens. But what I would say in terms of health benefits is that when you read the research in depth, you discover that the health benefits from the earliest years have been made up. It was always like there was a book that came out in 1966 called Feminine Forever, which really changed the trajectory of hormone therapy. And it was the book was, you know, well sold, but it was like republished in all kinds of women's magazines all over the world, and it really kicked off the hormone therapy revolution, let's say. And in that book, the doctor who wrote it, Dr. Wilson, he talked about, you know, he just pulled out any kind of disease that happens more often post midlife and attributed it to hormones, and then said, oh, well, if you take hormones, you're going to avoid all these diseases. There was no research to back it up. And the truth is that over the years, every time they've tried to do research about heart health, bone health, cognitive function, et cetera, the research hasn't been proven convincing. However, what often happens is that research is taken around women who go into surgical menopause, which means they've had their ovaries removed for some reason. Often with a hysterectomy, they have their ovaries removed, and then that creates a rapid drop in hormones. And in those cases, hormone therapy seems to have some kind of beneficial effect. However, what is often done in research is you take women who've gone through surgical menopause and you put them together in the same basket as women who go through natural menopause. And you're saying that the two kinds of women have the same needs. No, they don't. A woman who goes through surgical menopause, first of all, she has a condition that led to surgical menopause. Secondly, surgical menopause increases your risks of a number of conditions because the body goes into shock. There is this rapid drop in hormones. Now, it's not to say the conditions are inevitable. Your body still holds its intelligence, but it does go into shock. And so when you look at studies that seem to claim that there's some kind of advantage in terms of cognitive or heart or bone, you look down and you actually find it's for women who've taken estrogen only. Well, if you've taken estrogen only, you don't have a womb and you may not have your ovaries. So, you know, the research is often, you know, very blurry about that. But certainly with bone density, or the idea that hormones can improve your bone density, let's think about it. If you have your ovaries removed, there is a rapid drop of hormones. You can have a rapid loss of bone density. So estrogen in that case could be helpful. And by the way, I'm not a doctor, but I have read the research. But then to say, oh, and this is what's happened, then to say, oh, then that must be helpful for all women. That's going to help all women avoid osteoporosis moving forward. That's not the way we should be doing science. We need to check if that's true. And most women who go on hormone therapy will be advised after 7 to 8 years to stop the hormone therapy because of increased risks of prolonged use. Well, if you think that you're going to take hormone therapy at midlife and it's going to allow you to prevent a case of osteoporosis in your 70s, no, that's fantasy world. Yes, it can have it can change bone density when you're taking it at midlife. Very few women have problems with bone density at midlife. But as soon as you stop taking the hormone therapy, the changes in bone density are rapidly reversed. And it actually says this in, for example, the North American Menopause Society policy on hormone therapy, but it says it in the small print. On the titles or in the abstract, it will say it will help with, to prevent bone fractures and osteoporosis. But when you read it, you see, oh, well, this was about, the research was done on women who seem to have gone through surgical menopause, and the bone increase in bone density is rapidly reversed once hormones are stopped. So no, it's not going to prevent a case of osteoporosis, but what it will do is it gives women this false sense of security, and then maybe they're not doing, strength training, and they're not eating healthily, and they're not taking care of their stress, and they're not getting enough sunshine for their vitamin D, and then think, oh no, well, I'm just taking hormones, and that's going to prevent a case of osteoporosis. Well, it's actually not. So, it's a very unfortunate that women have been sold these stories. And with cognitive function as well, I'll talk about, what I see is that when we are going through this sensitive time and we have a lot of symptoms, it can impair our cognitive function. That's because lack of sleep, high stress, we're searching for solutions. We've got a lot on our plate. We're dealing with aging parents, with teenage kids, or kids leaving the home, or careers, or all of it together. So when we're in this sensitive time, it's very difficult to cope with so much mental load that we have in modern society. And we don't have the support system that we used to have. So there can be a temporary reduction in cognitive ability. But it seems that if you manage to take off the mental load a bit, you come to an understanding of how you can reduce your stress, you slow down, it's not going to have such a big impact. And as you go through menopause, it's reversed. So again, there are a lot of people coming out and say, well, we think, and it seems, we're going to prevent dementia. Again, you look at the studies, you look at the largest studies that were carried out, and the evidence actually could go, like the biggest, largest, most robust studies are showing the opposite, that women who tend to be on hormone therapy could have higher risk of dementia. Now, you don't know if it's because of the hormone therapy or it's because they live such stressed lives that they haven't taken care of. And so the stress, they continue with their stress, and that leads to dementia. But to certainly, to say that it's going to prevent cases of dementia or Alzheimer's is, it's just not based in robust science. So, and again, it gives women a false sense of, oh, I'm protected somehow by taking hormones, when they're actually not.
Right. In other words, so what I'm hearing is there was selection bias in those studies. There was some clear benefit for people who maybe were taking them, but for people who stop after the recommended time, they're not going to continue to see a benefit, for example, in the bone health, the dementia stuff, just not. So there's also, like, you're not sure. So did people go on the hormones because they had some underlying problem that didn't get solved because the hormone masked the problem, and then they didn't actually do the terrain work and the underlying sort of like psychosocial, spiritual revamping, transformation, as you've called it. Yeah, it's super interesting. It's a lot to think about. And I think for women who are really trying to sort of stay on the natural and listen to their bodies and do sort of what nature intended, it's a lot of permission to, you're going to be okay, is what I'm hearing, as long as you take this opportunity at the sensitive time to really do your inner work, to do the work that's going to, make you the healthy person that you want to be in your 70s, 80s.
Yeah. And, the whole idea that disease is inevitable, or that disease is, arises because of menopause, it's such a joke if you think about it logically. I mean, if women have, as we know from data, have lived throughout the times that we have data and through different cultures, have lived longer than men, how could it possibly be that menopause is a cause of disease? It doesn't make any logical sense. And there's a big industry that wants us to believe that disease is inevitable, that it's downhill from now on, that we're designed to malfunction, that we need hormones. And then the truth is, hormones, especially if you take it for a long time, they can create side effects. And lots of women don't know about the side effects. I mean, I think it's between 10 to 20% of women who are on progesterone, can experience heightened anxiety, and they don't know it. They don't know that that's a side effect, because it's just being pushed. It's just been promoted as, a cure-all, and for symptoms now and for diseases in the future. And in the end, it's doing harm, because I know from the case of what's happened in the UK, where it's really incredible how much discussion there is about HRT being a cure-all and a preventer of disease. And so women are now taking HRT not because they're experiencing symptoms, but because they think it's going to prevent a case of dementia. And they've seen their mother suffer from dementia, for example. Well, the science isn't there to back that up. And so they're exposing themselves to risks, because all medicines, including HRT, come with risks. And why are we doing this to women? Why are we giving them this false hope? And again, why are we not encouraging a more holistic approach to health, which is proven, and which is, you're going to, if you start moving and reducing your stress and eating better, that's going to help your heart and your brain and your bones and everything else. So yeah, it seems that it's a funnel to get people sicker in the end, rather than actually taking responsibility for their health.
Wow, and that's never happened before in the history of medicine.
No, never.
So I'd be curious to know what a woman who is listening to this right now and thinking, oh my gosh, this is the wise woman I've been looking for to help guide me through this sensitive time. How might someone work with you and what does that look like?
Right. So there are many ways that you can access my work. So from my book to a short online course to longer sort of group coaching courses to individual coaching. And it really is up to the woman, what she feels is most appropriate for her. And some women just honestly, they just listen. I hear from women quite a lot that they just listen to my podcast like on repeat, and then something drops, and they're like, "Oh my God, my body is brilliant. Oh my God, my hormones aren't crazy. Oh my God," and that sort of sends them off, on a new path, which is wonderful. But it's really up to the woman to see, what kind of support that she wants, and we go on a journey, whether it's through courses or individual coaching. We go on a journey to really create a deeper understanding of our innate health, of how we are our best healers, of how our bodies aren't crazy, of how they are designed to help us, designed to guide us, tapping into our intuition, learning what about the nature of thought and where wisdom lies and how we can be guided by the innate wisdom that's accessible to us all. And so this is what we do. And then women start experiencing fewer symptoms, their relationships start improving, they're experiencing more joy, they take these big decisions that they've been fearing, and life all of a sudden looks very different. And so it's a really wonderful process, and it's with unlimited potential. Everything could change in life, and we're not stuck in any one situation or any one circumstance once we understand how the human experience is created.
Yeah, and that element of choice, which is so
Yeah.
profound.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Is there anything we haven't discussed yet that you would like to share with this audience of seekers of information and the women in the audience who are listening and considering, maybe they've heard about HRT and maybe they're on HRT, maybe they really just want to, like, how would you, what else could we say to this group of women who are wondering about
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. I really love to connect women back to the guidance within them, because I can't tell any woman, this is the definitive path for you. But every woman's path is different. And there's no shame wherever a woman is now and wherever she's taken to get to where she is today. And it's so useful to understand that we do have these internal guidance systems that can tell us through wisdom, which is this calm voice that we can hear, which is this calm direction, which is this direction that offers opportunity and potential, that it can say, oh, maybe I could try this, or maybe I could try that, or maybe I don't need that anymore, or maybe I'm going to reduce my work hours, or maybe I am going to start walking in the morning. Whatever it is that a woman's body needs, the body's always communicating with us. We've just forgotten how to listen in. So that's a really crucial, element of how we can undergo the transformation that our body really wants us to undergo. So we do graduate to the wiser elder, and we do become the wiser woman, which is always within, trying to come to the surface.
I love it. Thank you so much, Tania. This has been a really beautiful conversation, and I know so many people will be inspired and moved by it.
I hope so. Thank you for allowing me to be your guest.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Healing Grove podcast. If you liked it, please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to deepen your experience further, consider grabbing a copy of the Healing Grove playbook. With journal prompts for this podcast and 41 others, it's the perfect place to record your learnings, keep track of the tools you explore, and reflect on your own experience. Finally, it's important to mention that even though I am a doctor, nothing you hear on this podcast, whether from myself or my guests, constitutes medical advice. Any intervention you try should always be discussed with and supervised by a trusted member of your own healing team. Thanks for listening, and see you next time in the Healing Grove.